some, Eric?
What's that?
I dropped the screen.
Sure.
Yeah, well, not.
You can see it.
Yeah, man, it was hurting my eyes. How do you pronounce that, Max?
Maxillariologist.
Max? What is that?
Just a person who's studying maxillarius.
What's Max? Okay.
Friend of mine made it up.
You made it up?
All right, we'll get started and not punish the prompt, but everybody, they'll work their way over here this morning. We did. We made two. The donuts are very happy draw over there, so it's all right. All right. Well, just wanted to kind of give you guys a quick overview and some ideas of what you're going to see over across the way with some ideas. Just a couple of things. Those of you know me as an elder here at the church, but this is my other sort of full-time hobby. as a lot of you know. I'm currently the president of the Miami Valley Orchid Society and also president of the Mid-America Orchid Congress, which is one of the co-organizations of the Orchid Fest. And the Mid-America Orchid Congress basically takes sort of all the way through Canada, all the way down through Florida in the middle part of the country, and encompasses about a little over 50 orchid societies to get together from education and conservation efforts as well. And just sort of term maxillariologist is one of the studies of one of the genus that I really fall in love with and enjoy. And a friend of mine over in England came up with the term and emailed one day and showed up, and I said, well, where did that term come from? And he said, well, I made it up. It's a study of maxillary. And I said, well, how do I become a maxillariologist? And he said, you're one too. So adopted it and really enjoy the term. So just a quick opening prayer this morning. Dear Lord, we thank you for all of these amazing creations that you've given us to enjoy, Lord, and really thank you for the fellowship, the opportunity to bring the community here to Emmanuel, to pray with them, and to meet and share your creations with them, Lord. Be with us as we fellowship today. Thank you for the food. Thank you for the volunteers. And thank you for all that are coming to make this possible. All this we ask in your name. Amen. All right, just a little bit of sort of background on this whole thing. I caught the orchid fever, which is actually an incurable disease, back in college up at Ball State, and really been growing for a little over 30 years now. I have a little over 1,000 orchids in my home greenhouse, and have received over 110 awards by the American Orchid Society on my growing plants, including I got one yesterday, so it's out there in the thing. So it's another maxillaria. It was recognized for the first time by the American Orchid Society. I actually have 4 orchids actually named after me. 2 hybrids, which 2 growers named after me, and then 2 actually species from Ecuador and Peru that we discovered that the taxonomists decided they needed to be named after me as well. So kind of cool opportunity that happened there. I do get the opportunity to talk all over the country. I've talked internationally, which is just really one of my favorite passions to go out and do. And really enjoy sharing the hobby with folks as well. And have had the opportunity to go down and see plants in the wild down in Ecuador, which is my primary passion of the part of the world that I enjoy. And of course, you can go travel right around even into the metro parks here and see native orchids, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then the passion is really how I got into orchids is through photography. So very much enjoy the photography. I'm actually one of the awards photographers for the Cincinnati Judging Center, so I get to take wonderful photographs of all that stuff. So I got 2. One is called Lindleyalis souri, and the other is Maxillaria souri. So those are the 2 species, and then the 2 hybrids. One is actually a maxillaria called Maxillaria ericssauer is one. It's a hybrid, and then the other one is an Asiopia ericssauer, another hybrid. So those are the names. So kind of fun. So just kind of starting out, just imagine Eden when God created the initial gardens and created the earth. What did that look like? That sort of perfect creation. I mean, do you think of these things sort of like this tropical rainforest or the waterfalls or sort of these amazing creatures that that are out there? The amazing birds and just these places that it was just that perfect, like we had the weather yesterday or early end of last week, mid 70s and nice and comfortable and things. Is that kind of what did Eden look like? Is it our native wildflower prairies that we have here in the Midwest that we can enjoy? Is it the snow-covered mountains? What is that that we enjoy? What's that sort of perfect place that we imagine that Pastor talked about in the sermon and things? Is what does heaven look like? But really, I sort of imagine God's creation is a healthy ecosystem. Everything's working together. It's balanced. It's just these amazing places like a coral reef, or again these sort of tropical, amazing rainforest places. But we don't treat God's creation very well in a lot of cases. We like to pave over it. We like to tear down the trees, and we like to create our lawns and these sorts of things. So, as we think about that, is how do we sort of create our own bit of Eden as we think about that. Come on, there we go. So things, the biggest threats that we want to think about, and these are things that we think about from a conservation perspective, from our orchids and where these things live. But things like climate change and pollution, invasive species is a big one as we keep moving around plants and what those do. But the biggest threat really that we're worried about is sort of a loss of species diversity, and that's the big one, because when you start losing that, you start losing that healthy balance and keeping our water resources and things healthy. But that is the biggest threat. That is really the biggest concern as we lose that diversity. And those are things we need to always bring back and think about. How do we plant the natives, and how do we really protect these spaces? So just a little bit on diversity. Orchids are actually a really good indicator species in terms of how healthy the native that environment is. They're very sensitive to very specific conditions in a lot of cases. There's some that aren't. There's some that are very sort of almost invasive in their own sense, that when you get some of these road cuts, they'll be some of the first species to come in. But a lot are very good indicators, especially our natives here in Ohio. It is the largest flowering plant family on the planet, about 35,000 species identified to date. It's one of the biggest draws for me is been growing all these years. I'm still learning stuff, and that's what's really so much fun about this group of plants. But for example, Colombia, the country of Colombia down in South America, has actually over 5,000 native species that are endemic and really found in an area that's only 10 times the size of Ohio. So that's pretty amazing to think about how diverse and incredible that is. Actually, backing up, those are the two orchid species that are named after me. The Maxillaria is on the left, and the Lindleyalis is on the right, both out of Ecuador and Peru. So, what is an orchid? Everybody sort of asks that. What makes an orchid? So basically, you have something that's called bilateral symmetry. So either you can draw a line vertically or horizontally and sort of divide the flower in half, and it's mirrored along that line is what makes that one of the pieces as an orchid. The other is what's called a fused column. So you heard in the science class, you learned about the pistil and the stamen and the sexual parts of the flower. Well, those are actually fused together in terms of an organ called the column that you can see in the center of every orchid. And so those two pieces are really what makes an orchid an orchid. And so most of what we grow are tropical. So the things that we're finding at Trader Joe's and out here and things are tropical. So they're coming from sort of the middle part of the world around the equator and the really nice warm parts of the world. And so most of them growing are what are called epiphytes, meaning that they actually will grow on another host plant. So typically a large tree, and they'll be growing with the roots hanging out and growing in the mosses and things like that. They're not parasites, meaning that they don't actually take anything from the host. They're not sucking sap or nutrients from that plant. They're just living there to get the right moisture level and the right air movement and things like that. So that's that term of an epiphyte. But they do grow pretty much everywhere on rocks and in the ground and things as well. Terry? They do, and we're going to actually get into that in a second here, but that's a great question. Yeah, so I mean, really, on any flower, a flower's purpose is to attract the pollinator to create seed. That's why a flower exists on any plant, is to make that happen. But these are the fascinating parts with that. And speaking of creating orchid seeds to reproduce, maturity on seeds can be amazing, anywhere from 60 days, so a very quick turnaround from pollination, up to about a year for the seed pods to actually to mature and be ready to sow, and can take anywhere from about 24 months to 10 years to bloom from that seed, which is pretty good. And if you're interested in buying seeds, don't buy them on eBay. They're not really orchid seeds. Who knows what they are, but they're not orchid seeds. Orchid seeds are actually really fine, almost dust-like, and you'll produce potentially millions of seeds in a seed pod, and really need to be produced in an artificial lab. In our cases. So what happens is, in these seed pods in the wild, you throw several million seeds out there, and you're going to find a few that are going to live and find that right spot. But we produce them in the lab so that we could get lots more plants and a much higher success rate. But not something that you're going to do in your home growing area. So where do orchids come from? That's where we're looking at. They come from all over the world, except for the two polar ice caps are where orchids come from. And there's 54, 55 species, depending on who you talk to, here in Ohio. So you can go out. A lot of the state parks have them, so our yellow lady slippers and pink lady slippers, the fringed prairie orchid, there's just amazing things, and they range anywhere from things that are fairly tall, maybe a couple of feet tall, to these little tiny plants that might only be a few inches tall that bloom, and they'll bloom really from the spring all the way through the fall. We've got some at Cox Arboretum, for example, is some that are really close out into, like I said, a lot of the state parks and cedar bogs and places like that you can go see these things, but very exotic, very, very cool things. But as I said, most of the time we're talking about tropical places, the ones we grow. So you'll find them on branches like this, as the epiphytes that we talked about. You see the bromeliads and the ferns, and the orchids will be growing right amongst all of those in the branches of the trees. So just some of the God's creation that are just so amazing is the diversity of color on this. I mean, anything from flowers that are almost black to reds and pinks and whites and oranges and all kinds of amazing just color combinations. And it's just something that I get up every day and just really love, is just that creativity. And it just makes you really realize that there's no way that just happened. I mean, how do you come up with some of these things that that are out there that are here for us, that are just absolutely incredible? The fragrances among orchids, and again, this is all has to do with the pollinators and attracting the particular pollinator. But some orchids have absolutely no fragrance. It's all visual that they can do. Some are fragrant at night. Some are fragrant in the morning. Some are fragrant when the sun hits them. The ones that are pollinated by moths are typically white flowers, and they're fragrant only at night, because that's when the moths are out. There's no reason to be fragrant during the day because there's no pollinators out at that point. Lots of very sweet, wonderful fragrances. The one in the upper right-hand corner is one of the bulbophyllums, and they're actually pollinated by flies. So their fragrance is very much like rotting dead flesh. It is horrible. And one of the, sort of rotten sushi. The other expression was a herd of rotting dead elephants, has been another description of them. But amazing flowers. But again, if you're a fly, that's very appealing. So attracting that pollinator is what you're looking for. So, very creative as well. And it's all about finding a mate. Terry, you ask, what about the flowers? And the flowers can be all kinds of fun things, but they're all exactly created to create and attract a very specific pollinator. And in some cases, it might be a very specific species of that bee or moth or hummingbird in some cases that are just really amazing things. And really one thing, for example, there's the native orchids called the Orpheus in Europe, and it's made to look like a male bee, and they bloom right at breeding season of these bees. And these male bees are very territorial, and so when these flowers come up, these bees are going after. It's like, hey, there's a competitor for my girl folks over here, and they attack these flowers and they pollinate them in the process. So it's just all kinds of really strange things. Orchids are food for us as well. Anybody recognize this? Vanilla beans. Vanilla is an orchid. The flowers only last a day, and they're in commercial production. There's a pinching mechanism that they go up and pinch the flower, and it pollinates the flower. It makes the seed pods, so the vanilla bean is actually the seed pod, and those are harvested and dried, and you get the vanilla bean is an orchid. So kind of fun. They need to be at least they're a vine. They need to be at least, come on in, guys, at least 6 feet long before they start really blooming and create these things. So again, that perfect match. This is a story of an Engrecum called Sesquipedaliae from Madagascar. And Charles Darwin found this flower, and he hypothesized that there had to be a moth that had a tongue that was about 14 inches long in order to pollinate this flower. So you see that sort of green spur that comes down sort of the center of kind of from the back of the flower. At the bottom of that spur is nectar. And that's what the hummingbird and the moth is looking for. And it actually, they found it in about, National Geographic found it in about 1980. And they finally found this moth, and it would come up to the flower and unroll its tongue and sticks it all the way down that nectar. It gets the nectar and pollinates the flower. So, I mean, how does that just happen? It can't. I mean, God creates that relationship. It's just, absolutely amazing. This is another one called Coranthes, which is called the bucket orchid. And it's again, pollinated by a very specific species of Euglosian bee. And if it's not the right species, it falls down at the bottom of the flower and gets into this sticky sap and can't get out. But if it's the right species, it fits perfectly in the flower to pollinate the flower and can get out the other end without getting all soaked and sticky. Here's the one I was talking about. I forget it was in here. The mimicry. This is the Orpheus European thing, but the flowers look just like a bee. And it's the male version, and they'll come after it, and really trying to defend its territory. But it happens right at breeding season, and everything happens all at the right time. There's also fun things, these triggers that happen. This is a catasetum, for example. They've actually got a spring-loaded trigger, and if you stick your finger, and it's really fun. We like, these weird sense of humor that we have as orchidists. Here, come in and smell this flower, and you put your nose into this, and if you just barely touch that trigger, it sends the pollen, and it's very sticky. The pollen capsule will stick to your nose. And it's very kind of difficult to get off, but it's really pretty hilarious to see. And if you're walking around with this like pollen capsule on your nose, it's a little hard to get off. But those weird things that we do, but they're spring loaded. They'll pop and just really kind of fun. And this is another one. These are the lady slippers that you'll see. This is a Phragmipedium bessiae. And if you look at the pouch, the backside, there's sort of these windows. And what happens is the little bee goes into the pouch, and there's little hairs. And if you think about it, if you get into a trap, where are you going to go? You're going to go to the light. So there's these little windows at the back of the pouch that helps that insect come back, and it kind of crawls out the back of the flower, picks up the pollen capsules, and onto the next flower. And their insects are not maybe real smart, and they go do it again. And as they come out the flower, they drop that pollen capsule off again and pollinate the flower and create the seed. And then there's always a sense of humor. I think God's kind of fun. It's like, hey, let's see what we can create here. And this one's actually, the one on the left is Stelis cypripidioides. It's out actually in a little globe out here that I brought this weekend. But it looks like a fuzzy toilet bowl to me. It's like, what's that? But it's just absolutely funny. But that flower is only maybe 1/4 inch across. They're tiny, but they're just these amazing, lots of detail into the flowers. And it's just amazing, glorious creations. I mean, this is a big pleurothallus. It gets about 30 inches tall and produces these almost golf ball sized flowers in this big cluster. And just amazing colors and tiny little flowers and detail. That's a pencil point. And it's almost always in flower, right at the center of the leaf. Just a cute little thing, but you got to get up and really close and friendly with it to really see, but it's just amazing, the diversity. And just, these are brassias, which are amazing. They're wonderfully sweetly fragrant and can be up to about 20 inches tall on each flower. Just absolutely incredible. And little fuzzy things. You look at the leaf, it's all fuzzy. This grows up in the cloud forests of the Andes Mountains. So what happens is the mists come in, and as the mists come across the plant, it causes that mist to condensate onto all those fuzzy hairs, and it's actually how it waters the plant, so it gets the moisture it's looking for. But even the flower's fuzzy on these guys. These are in bloom out here. This is Habenaria medusa. These actually are really amazing plants. They go completely dormant in the wintertime. They drop all their foliage. You stick the pot up on the shelf and you forget about it for about 4 or 5 months, literally no water. They start coming up from the tubers in the spring. You start watering them, and then basically from about March or April till now, they're all blooming right now. They produce these amazing, wonderful flowers. There's a whole bunch of the different pinks and whites and things out there. It's just this blooming season for the habanerias. And little, creating little fun foliage and with little maroon, purple flowers that you can find. To very large. This plant is another maxillaria. The plant's about 30 inches tall. I was actually able to collect this when I was down in Ecuador. It took me 14 years to bloom it, to finally figure out what it was for the first time. But it's an amazing thing. The flowers are almost 4 inches across. Just glorious things. And then the lady slippers and all kinds of things. These are the Asian version of the lady slippers as well. So just a couple things going on out there to enjoy. Make sure you kind of point the kids to the kids' corner. I think they were starting to do the scavenger hunt out there, and you're welcome to do that, but kind of fun things. We shared a lot of prayers yesterday, and that'll go on today with the prayer table. So it's really cool to watch the public kind of come in and see the prayer table and share that. So that's been going on. So it's been a great partnership with our organizations. We awarded 7 national awards yesterday through the American Orchid Society, which is pretty amazing, and about 13 show trophies that are out there. And there's experts out there. If you have any other questions, you can see a badge out there. Ask questions. But we got folks in from about a dozen states, from Canada and Ecuador. So Jane from Ecuador on the kind of the left-hand side as you go out. English isn't great, but great, wonderful individual to talk to. So with that, I'd like just to hopefully you guys enjoy the show and maybe appreciate what you're looking at a little more out there. So thanks for coming.